My name is Jeff, and I live in Dayton, Ohio. I never considered myself a superstitious person. I'm a logical guy, always have been. But something happened to me last year that I can't explain, something that still sends chills down my spine when I think about it. It was a normal day, just like any other, but it ended with an experience I'll never forget. I was driving home with my 3-year-old son, Miles, in the back seat. It was a bright, sunny afternoon, and we had just finished visiting my parents. Miles was happily singing one of his favorite nursery rhymes, and I was enjoying the peace and quiet of the drive. As we passed by a modest cemetery on the outskirts of town, something strange happened. Miles suddenly stopped singing. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, expecting to see him dozing off, but instead he was staring intently out the window. Then, out of nowhere, he pointed toward the cemetery and said,
"Look at all those people."
I frowned and turned my head to see what he was talking about. The cemetery was small, almost more like a garden, with only a few flowers and plaques scattered around. I didn't see anyone there. "What people, buddy?" I asked, trying to see what had caught his attention. He pointed again, more insistent this time.
"All those people over there.
He said, his little voice full of certainty.
There sure are a lot of grandmas."
A chill ran down my spine. The cemetery was empty. There wasn't a soul in sight. I looked back at Miles, who was still staring out the window, his eyes wide and serious. "What are they doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He replied,
"They are all standing there, looking down at the grass."
his tone eerily matter-of-fact. I didn't know what to say. My heart was racing and a cold sweat had broken out on my forehead. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. "Okay, buddy, let's get home," I said, my voice shaking slightly. I pressed down on the accelerator, eager to put some distance between us and that cemetery. We drove the rest of the way in silence. I kept glancing back at Miles, who had returned to humming his song as if nothing had happened. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what he had said. Who were the people he saw? Why didn't I see them? And why did he call them grandmas? When we got home, I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over me. I told myself that Miles had just been imagining things, that it was nothing to worry about. But later that day, as I was sitting on the couch watching TV with him, he said something that made my blood run cold. He turned to me, his face serious, and said,
"You know, they weren't alive."
I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you mean, Miles?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world.
"Those people we saw, they were all paused."
I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, staring at my son, my mind racing. What did he mean by paused? Was he talking about the people in the cemetery? And how could he know they weren't alive? Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what Miles had said. Every time I looked at him, I wondered if he really had some kind of sixth sense, or if it was just his imagination. But the more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. I started having trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I would see those empty graves in the cemetery, and I would imagine the people Miles had described, standing there, staring down at the grass. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something that wasn't quite human. One night, I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. I had a nightmare about the cemetery. In the dream, I was standing in the middle of the graves, surrounded by shadowy figures. They were all staring at me with hollow, lifeless eyes, and I couldn't move. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I woke up just as one of the figures reached out to touch me, its hand cold as ice. After that, I started avoiding the cemetery. I would take the long way home, just to avoid driving past it. I didn't want to risk seeing anything, or worse, having Miles see something again. But no matter how hard I tried to forget, the memory of that day haunted me. A few weeks later, I was driving home late at night. I had stayed late at work and was exhausted, just wanting to get home and crawl into bed. I wasn't thinking about the cemetery or anything else. I was just focused on getting home. But as I turned onto the road that led past the cemetery, I felt a sudden sense of dread. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that I was just tired, but the feeling grew stronger as I got closer. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I was almost at the cemetery when something made me look out the window. Standing at the edge of the cemetery, right by the road, was a woman. She was wearing a long white dress, and her hair was dark and flowing. She was staring at me, her eyes empty and hollow. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat. But when I looked again, she was gone. I sat there in the middle of the road, my hands shaking, trying to catch my breath. I told myself that it was just my imagination, that I was just tired and seeing things. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I had seen her, just like Miles had seen those people. After that night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong with that cemetery, something dark and unnatural. I started doing some research, trying to find out if anyone else had experienced anything strange there, and what I found out only made things worse. It turns out that the cemetery has a dark history. It's been there for over 100 years, and there have been countless reports of strange sightings and unexplained occurrences. People have seen figures standing among the graves, heard voices when no one was around, and felt cold spots even on the warmest days. But the most disturbing thing I found out was that the cemetery is said to be haunted by the spirits of those who were buried there without a proper funeral. The cemetery was originally a potter's field, a place where the poor and the unknown were buried in unmarked graves. It's said that their spirits are restless, doomed to wander the cemetery for eternity. I don't know if that's true, but after what I've experienced, I wouldn't be surprised. I try not to think about it too much, but every now and then I can't help but wonder if Miles really did see something that day, something that I wasn't meant to see. I still avoid that road whenever I can. I've never driven past the cemetery again, and I don't plan to. But no matter how hard I try to forget, the memory of that day still haunts me. Sometimes, late at night, I'll hear Miles talking in his sleep, and I'll wonder if he's dreaming about those people, those grandmas he saw in the cemetery. Even though time has passed, that day remains etched in my memory, an unsettling reminder that there are things in this world we can't always explain. Whether it was a child's imagination or something more, I may never know for sure. But one thing is certain. The moment you experience something like this, your perspective on reality changes forever. Now, whenever I pass a cemetery or hear a child speak of things unseen, I can't help but wonder if there's more to this world than meets the eye. Maybe it's best if we don't look too closely.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm 24 years old. Today, I want to share with you a terrifying story that my friend once told me. It's about something that happened to her sister's friend, and while I can't say for sure if it's true, it's definitely one of the scariest things I've ever heard. Whether you believe it or not, it's a story that will stay with you, lingering in your thoughts long after you've heard it. It was an ordinary morning when my friend's sister's friend Lisa went out for her usual walk in the park. The sun was just starting to rise, casting long shadows over the empty walking track. As she walked, she suddenly heard a soft, almost seductive voice calling her name.
Lisa.
Confused, she looked around, but no one was there. Just the faint sound of the wind rustling through the trees. On the ground ahead, she spotted something glimmering in the dirt. It was a ring, lying in the middle of the track, its delicate design catching the light in an unnatural way. Compelled by the voice, Lisa picked up the ring and slid it onto her finger. The moment she did, everything around her fell eerily silent, and a strange light seemed to emanate from the ring, tightening painfully around her finger. Panicking, Lisa tried to pull the ring off, but it wouldn't budge. The light dimmed, and the park around her felt colder, darker. She decided to go home, hoping the ring was just stuck and nothing more. Back at home, strange things started happening. The first incident occurred when Lisa was washing her face. As she bent down to rinse, she noticed something odd in the mirror. Her reflection stayed behind, staring back at her. Frightened, Lisa quickly looked up, but her reflection was back to normal. Shaken, she left the bathroom, trying to convince herself it was just her imagination. Later that night, while watching TV, Lisa felt a presence behind her. In the reflection of the TV screen, she saw a shadowy figure standing directly behind her. She spun around, but the figure was gone. The house was quiet as Lisa stood at the sink, washing the last of the dishes. The soft clinking of plates and the hum of running water were comforting sounds at first, a gentle rhythm marking the end of her long day. But then, in the silence, she heard it, a strange rhythmic tapping from behind the walls. It was faint at first, barely noticeable, but as she stood there, her hands wet and soapy, the tapping grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't the pipes, it wasn't the wind. No, the sound was different. It was irregular, like something scratching at the walls, something trying to get out. Lisa clenched her jaw, willing herself to ignore it. But every tap seemed to inch closer, echoing in her mind. Finally, she finished the dishes and turned off the kitchen light, intending to head to bed. But the moment the room fell into darkness, she froze. Just a few feet away, a shadowy figure stood motionless, barely visible, but unmistakably human-like. Lisa's breath caught, her heart thundering as she quickly switched the light back on. The room was empty. Lisa's hands trembled as she turned the light off again, eyes scanning the darkness. This time, the figure appeared closer, its outline sharper, more defined. She gasped, flipping the switch again. Light flooded the room, and once again, there was nothing there. She was alone. Steeling herself, Lisa flipped the light off one last time, hoping it was just her mind playing tricks. She held her breath. The darkness seemed to throb around her, empty and silent. Relief washed over her, and she let out a shaky exhale. But when she turned the light back on, her relief turned to terror. The ghostly figure was inches from her face, grinning a smile so twisted, so unnatural, that Lisa felt her knees weaken beneath her. Overcome by fear, she stumbled backward, nearly tripping as she turned and ran toward her bedroom. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she reached her bed. Throwing herself beneath the blanket as if it were a shield, she pulled it over her head, eyes wide, every nerve in her body tense and alert. She lay there, heart hammering in her chest, unwilling to peek out, her mind replaying that twisted smile over and over. That night, sleep stayed far away from Lisa, leaving her wide-eyed in terror beneath the thin cover of her blanket. As days passed, the occurrences grew more frequent. Lisa began to feel watched at all times, even when she was completely alone. The ring seemed to grow heavier on her finger, as if it was sinking into her skin. One evening, after returning home late from a shopping trip, Lisa found her husband asleep in bed, covered entirely by a blanket. Exhausted, she didn't think much of it and climbed into bed beside him. Hours later, Lisa was startled awake by her phone ringing. It was her husband calling from outside, asking her to open the door because he had forgotten his keys. Terrified, Lisa slowly turned her head to look at the figure lying next to her, realizing with horror that it wasn't her husband. It was something else, something far more sinister. As she reached out to uncover the figure, the blanket slid off by itself, revealing a grotesque, ghostly face with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. Lisa screamed, and everything went black. Her husband finally broke through the door. Only to find Lisa lifeless on the bed. The ring had fallen off her finger and was lying on the floor, shining faintly in the darkness. The ring slowly began to move on its own, rolling across the floor and out the door, as if it had a will of its own, heading back to the park where it was first found. The next morning, a woman walking in the park noticed the ring lying on the track. Drawn to it, she bent down and picked it up, unaware of the horror she was about to unleash.
My name is Joe, and I'm 35 years old. I'm just an ordinary guy who never believed much in the supernatural until this happened. What I'm about to share with you isn't just a story, it's something that changed my life forever. You see, it's one thing to hear about haunted houses and ghostly encounters, but it's a whole different experience when you live through it yourself. This experience left a mark on me that I'll carry for the rest of my life. It made me question everything I thought I knew, and it still sends chills down my spine every time I think about it. My brother and I had always been close, so when he decided to follow me to Georgia after I moved from California, I was more than happy to help him settle in. David found this old house built back in the 1800s on the outskirts of a small town. It looked charming from the outside, the kind of place where you'd expect to raise a family. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt an icy chill run down my spine. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I helped David with the move despite my unease. As I carried boxes into one of the bedrooms, I heard something that made me freeze in my tracks, heated whispering, like an argument between two people.
Why did you hurt them?
The voices seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, hovering near the ceiling. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to make sense of what I was hearing. I noticed the wallpaper in one of the hallways. It was old and peeling, revealing strange handwritten words beneath the cracks. As I leaned closer to examine them, the ink seemed to shimmer, as if freshly written. Then I heard it. Scratching sounds, faint but deliberate, like a quill scratching on parchment. The words beneath the wallpaper began shifting, rearranging themselves into sentences. Leave now. She watches. I stumbled back, heart racing. I bolted from the room and confronted David, asking if he had noticed anything strange. He admitted that he felt uneasy too, but tried to brush it off.
The house is just old,
He said,
nothing to worry about.
but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. One evening, while David and I sat in the living room, the faint clinking of cutlery echoed from the empty dining room. At first, we thought it was Emily playing, but when we entered the room, the table was set, plates, glasses, and a decanter of wine that hadn't been there before. Dust covered everything as if it had been untouched for decades, but faint fingerprints streaked across the plates. And in the wine glass was a thick, black liquid that dripped onto the floor, vanishing before it hit the ground. Days passed, and I kept my distance from the house, only stopping by to check on David occasionally. But the unease never left me. Then one day, something happened that neither of us could ignore. David's young daughter, Emily, began talking about an old lady who lived in the house. She described her in detail, from her old-fashioned dress to her kind smile. But there was one problem. There was no old lady living there. The next day, Emily handed me a drawing she had made of the house. It was detailed for a 4-year-old, showing every window and door. At first, I thought it was charming until I noticed one detail: an old woman standing at the second-floor window. Her face was a dark smudge, and around her were jagged black marks like claws tearing through the paper.
She lives there,
Emily said casually.
but she doesn't like visitors.
At first, we thought it was just a child's imagination, but then things took a darker turn. One afternoon, Emily disappeared. We searched the house in a panic, only to find her calmly walking down a busy road outside. Her small hand was raised as if she was holding someone's hand, but she was alone. When we asked her what she was doing, she simply said,
I was walking with the old lady.
Emily's story sent chills down our spines. She described how the old lady had opened the heavy front door, led her outside, and they'd even stopped to pet a dog before heading down the road. The door was far too heavy for a 4-year-old to open on her own, but Emily insisted that the old lady had helped her. Her innocence was terrifying. She believed every word she said. David tried to rationalize what had happened, but the fear in his eyes was undeniable. The atmosphere in the house grew more oppressive by the day. Whispers became more frequent, shadows seemed to move on their own, and the once charming home now felt like a prison. Emily's interactions with the old lady became more frequent, and each time she spoke of her with an eerie fondness. One night, we heard Emily's laughter echoing from her room. When we entered, she wasn't alone. She sat cross-legged in front of a mirror, talking to her reflection. But her reflection wasn't mirroring her movements. Instead, it pressed its hands against the glass as if trying to escape.
She's teaching me how to come through,
Emily said with a smile. The breaking point came when I visited the house one last time. As soon as I stepped inside, I was overwhelmed by the feeling of being watched. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel a cold presence following me from room to room. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw her, a figure in an old-fashioned dress, standing in the shadows. But when I turned to face her, she was gone. That night, David made the decision to leave. We packed up their belongings as quickly as possible, not daring to look back at the house that had once seemed so welcoming. The thought of Emily's innocent words haunted us both.
The old lady opened the door.
We knew we had to get out before something worse happened. We never spoke of the old lady again, but the memory of that house still lingers, a reminder that some places are better left alone. Just as we finished loading the last of the bags into the cab, I couldn't resist the urge to look back at the house one more time. There, in the window on the first floor, I saw her, the old lady. Her ghostly face twisted in anger, glaring down at us. Her eyes locked onto mine, filled with a fury that sent a cold wave of terror through me. I quickly turned away, my heart racing as we drove off, leaving the house and its haunting secrets behind. Even after they moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed them, a lingering presence that refused to let go. I still get chills thinking about it, the whispers, the shadows, and the old lady who had taken Emily for a walk. I've come to realize that some things can't be explained, and that house, well, it's a place I'll never go back to.
Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and I'm from Millbrook. I've always been the kind of person who never believed in ghosts or the paranormal, until one night that changed everything. What I'm about to share with you is the scariest experience of my life, and it still haunts me to this day. It was supposed to be just another weekend road trip. Me, Tyler, and Sam had been planning it for weeks, a break from the monotony of everyday life. We were cruising through the countryside, the sun hanging low in the sky when our car's tire suddenly blew out. Of course, it had to happen in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by an endless sea of cornfields. No one in sight for miles. We got out, scratching our heads, trying to figure out what to do. Then we saw it. A farmhouse in the middle of the cornfield, half hidden by the tall stalks. It wasn't too far away, and we figured they might have a spare tire or at least a phone. So we started making our way through the cornfield, the stalks rustling unnervingly in the breeze. As we walked deeper into the field, we noticed something strange. Scarecrows. Dozens of them. They were eerily lifelike, wearing old, tattered clothes and positioned at odd angles, almost as if they were watching us. I felt an uneasy chill creep down my spine. These weren't normal scarecrows. When we reached the farmhouse, the main door was wide open. There was no sign of anyone around, but we could hear the steady whir of a sewing machine coming from upstairs. Sam wanted to go inside to check it out, but Tyler and I thought it was better to stay outside and maybe wait for someone to come by. After some back and forth, Sam decided to go in on his own. Tyler and I hung around outside for a while, but as the sun started to dip below the horizon, Sam still hadn't returned. The place felt unnervingly quiet now, the only sound coming from the occasional rustle of corn in the breeze. The scarecrows seemed to have shifted position, but I chalked it up to my mind playing tricks on me. Still, I couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. We decided to head back to the house to find Sam. As we walked, Tyler suddenly stopped and pointed. That scarecrow wasn't there before. I followed his gaze and my blood ran cold. It looked disturbingly like Sam. Same height, same build, and the clothes. It couldn't be, right? But the resemblance was uncanny. Then, all of a sudden, the whispers began softly, like a breeze weaving through the cornfield. At first, I tried to brush it off as the wind, just nature playing tricks. But the sound became distinct, clearer with every step.
Turn back.
Too late.
He's watching.
The words slid through the air, coming from everywhere and nowhere. My stomach knotted as I grabbed Tyler's arm. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the eerie murmur. Tyler's face was pale, his wide eyes darting around. "It's voices," he stammered. The whispers surrounded us, growing louder, almost drowning out my own thoughts. The corn stalks swayed without wind, their rustling amplifying the unease. I could swear the shadows among the stalks were moving, shifting toward us. And then, all at once, the whispers stopped. The sudden silence was suffocating, pressing down on me like a weight.
Run!
A guttural voice commanded, reverberating through the air. My body locked up in terror before instinct took over. Tyler and I sprinted blindly, the corn stalks clawing at us, the whispers rising again in a chaotic chorus behind us. The field felt alive, its tendrils reaching to trap us. With hearts pounding, we rushed into the farmhouse, not bothering to knock this time. The farmhouse was quiet, too quiet. Every creak of the old floorboards beneath my boots sent a shiver down my spine. Tyler and I entered a room that seemed untouched by time. Dust hung thick in the air, and the faint smell of mildew made my nose crinkle. In the corner stood an old mirror, its surface clouded and cracked. Something about it pulled me closer, like it wanted me to see something. I took a hesitant step forward and froze. My reflection wasn't moving. My chest tightened as I stared at the still figure. Its hollow eyes bore into mine, and its lips slowly stretched into an unnatural, crooked smile. "Jake, we need to go," Tyler said urgently, tugging at my sleeve, but I couldn't look away. The reflection raised its hand, pointing directly behind me. My breath caught in my throat as I turned slowly, expecting the worst. But there was nothing there, just empty air. When I whipped back around, the reflection was gone. Only the empty, cracked surface of the mirror remained, and the room felt darker, colder. The sewing machine was still going upstairs. As we climbed the stairs, the tension in the air was suffocating. When we reached the room, we saw her, an old woman, her face pale and gaunt, sitting at the machine. She wasn't sewing clothes, though. She was stitching something much more sinister. She turned to look at us, her hollow eyes sending shivers down my spine. "Are you looking for your friend?" she asked, her voice rasping like dry leaves. We demanded to know where Sam was. She gave us a ghostly smile and in the most chilling tone said, "He's in the field, with the others." It clicked then. The scarecrow we saw earlier, it wasn't just a scarecrow. Tyler grabbed my arm, and without a second thought, we bolted out of the house. The cornfield seemed to close in around us as we ran, our footsteps muffled by the tall stalks. I swear I could hear the woman's laughter echoing behind us. We didn't stop running until we reached the police station. Our legs were burning, lungs aching, but fear kept pushing us forward. The streets were eerily quiet, our panicked footsteps echoing off the pavement in the still night. We burst through the doors, breathless, collapsing at the front desk, struggling to explain what had happened. The officers looked at us with disbelief as we recounted the events, their expressions shifting from concern to skepticism. At first, they thought we were pulling some kind of prank or that we were just hysterical from being lost. But something about the sheer terror in our eyes made them reconsider. After some hesitation, 2 officers agreed to come with us to the farmhouse. I wish they hadn't. When we finally returned, the place looked completely different, abandoned, as if no one had lived there for years. The windows were shattered, the front door hanging off its hinges. Vines crawled up the walls, overtaking the house as if it had been left to rot for decades. The vibrant, well-kept farmhouse we had seen just hours ago was gone, replaced by this decaying shell. One of the officers glanced at us, his brow furrowed. "Are you sure this is the place?" We nodded, hearts pounding, knowing something was terribly wrong. There were no scarecrows in the field, no sewing machine upstairs, no sign of Sam or the strange woman. It was as if every trace of life had been wiped clean. The officers searched every inch of the farmhouse, from the attic to the cellar, but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, nothing. It was like the entire place had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the shell of a forgotten ruin. We stood outside, watching helplessly as they combed through the empty rooms, feeling the weight of dread settle in. Sam was nowhere to be found. The fields, once filled with crops, were now barren and overgrown. The cops finally called off the search, shaking their heads in frustration. There was nothing more they could do. We left empty-handed, with no answers, and to this day, I have no idea what happened to Sam. He's just gone. It's as if he never existed. Sometimes I think about going back to that farmhouse, but the thought of what I might, or might not, find keeps me away. It's been years since that night, but I can't shake the memory. The events of that night have lingered in the back of my mind, like a shadow I can't escape. Every time I drive past a cornfield, I find myself scanning the horizon, looking for Sam. I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes I swear I see him, just standing there, motionless, blending into the rows of tall stalks, watching. It's always just a glimpse, a figure in the distance, and when I blink or look again, he's gone. But the feeling stays with me. That eerie sense of being watched, of something or someone out there just beyond reach. I try to convince myself it's just my imagination, the guilt of that night playing tricks on me. But deep down, I can't help but wonder, what if Sam is still out there, trapped in that place between worlds, unable to leave? I'll never know for sure, but one thing's certain. Every time I pass a cornfield, I can't help but look for him, hoping for answers I'll probably never get. And that's where our story ends. Or maybe it doesn't. To this day, no one knows what really happened to my friend that night. Some say it was all a twisted illusion, but I know what I saw, and I'll never forget that scarecrow staring back at me, wearing his face. Do you have a story that chills you to the bone? Maybe something strange that happened to you, or a tale you've heard from friends? If so, we want to hear it. Send us your personal experiences or the scariest stories you've come across, and who knows, your story could be featured in our next episode. Before you go, don't forget to share this video, hit that like button if it scared you just a little, and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying tales. And hey, hit that bell icon so you never miss a new episode. You wouldn't want to miss what's coming next. Your support is the most important thing to us. Every like, share, and subscription helps us continue to bring these spine-chilling stories to life. So thank you, and remember, you never know what's lurking just beyond the cornfield.